Good morning, Watershed. It is really good to be with you guys this morning. I was reading in a book by the name of a guy by the name of Dan Siegel wrote this book called Mindsight, and he was talking about this whole idea that falling in love is something that most of us have done with maybe a lot of regularity, or maybe it's happened a couple times, or maybe just once in your lifetime. That's relatively easy. It's the idea of standing in love that is way more complicated, that takes way more work, that takes a lot more energy. And if maybe I could summarize this entire 8-week series talking about love and what does it mean to find that person, or if you do find that person, how to stay the course with that person, how to engage them, that it is more complicated, more difficult, it is more sophisticated to be able to stand in love than it is to fall in love. And so a few years ago, I was on my annual trip with a friend of mine. He and I grew up together. We lived around the corner from each other. We were in grade school and middle school and high school together. We're roommates in the same university together. We planted our churches around the same time, and we have had a very paralleled life. And every February we get together, and we rent a log cabin somewhere in Tennessee or North Carolina and spend 3 or 4 days just reconnecting. And it's conversation for about 3 days straight. And for the longest time, he's brought me into this conversation about this book that he read by the name of David Emerald, The Empowerment Dynamic. And he's talked about it, and I never really took it in, to be honest with you. I heard him say it, but it just never really stuck in terms of the content of what he was trying to say. And so he would take this proverbial napkin, and he would write down a triangle. And he would, on that triangle, write 3 specific words: persecutor, rescuer, and victim. And he would go on and proceed to tell me how these 3 words and how this triangle, which is called the drama triangle, is something that's really important to understand because it helps us understand how we see each other and how we engage relationship. And so he shared that with me a few years ago, and I heard it, and I'm not sure it really stuck very well. So we got together a couple years ago, another year later, and he says, "Hey, remember that triangle thing?" He starts talking about it, and I'm like, yeah, whatever, I got it. And then last year, due to COVID, we didn't really reconnect. And this past month or so, we got together again, and he began writing this triangle out again, and persecutor, victim, and rescuer. And he began to proceed to sort of break into what this means and how this is relevant. And for whatever reason, maybe it's just I'm at 51. I don't know if it's a place in life. It's the relationships that I have. For whatever reason, it began to kick in a way that I never understood or seen before. I remember as he's sharing this story with me and sharing what these words mean, and this idea of this triangle being a little bit of a drama suck, is a place that you don't want to be, how it's toxic and how it's not the kind of relationships you want to have. I began to think, well, what does this look like for me in my own reality? What does this look like for the people I get to exist with and spend time with and love and care about very deeply? I began to realize there are times that I find myself being caught into this space. And so there's this guy long time ago, Dr. Cartman, who was a student of Eric Bernet. If you remember Psych 101, he might have been some thinking you would have heard of a long time ago, maybe when you were in school or in college. He's kind of the father of this concept, this thought, this movement. And so I looked at this a little bit more. I began to realize, oh my goodness, this is deeply meaningful, not only to me personally, but maybe to a series like this. Maybe this would be the most fitting way to wrap up our conversation of the past 8 weeks. That maybe giving you a tool, something that in a few moments here you can walk away with, and maybe it won't take you 3 or 4 years like it took me. Maybe in a few moments you can grasp this and begin to work this sort of narrative into your life and begin to understand how this plays out. So I want to have a little bit of the conversation that my friend Jamie had with me over this napkin in the woods in this cabin. And he began to say, well, this conversation here, this narrative, is really rooted in the idea of victimhood. Now, it's really important to understand that this dialogue is between 2 people who understand at an unconscious level that this is playing out. So they're not keenly aware of how they're seeing the way they engage each other. This triangle is a narrative between two different individuals, two different people. Often it's a spouse, often it's a coworker, it's a neighbor, it's somebody maybe you've connected with. And the relationship is not healthy. It's fundamentally toxic. It's a role that you see yourself in, it's a role that the other person is in, and again, it's often not a conscious kind of relationship. Let me be really clear. When we talk about victims in this setting, this is not the kind of victimhood that is very legitimate when you've been a victim of abuse or some kind of tragedy that's happened in your life in a very real sense. That's different than the kind of victim that we're talking about here. So I want to be really clear on that. So if I take a second here and I just give language to these three words, or maybe narrative, because maybe you find yourself saying, well, I think I might be one of these, or I might fall into one of these. So just kind of check the boxes for yourself or for the person that you might exist with or spend time with, and maybe you find some reality in the situation for you. So if you find yourself being a victim, the central role of a victim in this drama triangle is they see themselves as sort of this poor me person, that they're victimized, that they're oppressed, that they're powerless, that they're helpless, that they're hopeless, they're dejected, they feel shame. They come across incredibly super sensitive. They want to be sort of experienced as with kid gloves. I can do this I can't do this by myself kind of disposition. They are intrinsically, or they see themselves, again, not even consciously always, but they see themselves and they come off as intrinsically damaged and incapable. Their greatest fear in life is that they won't make it. Because after all, they are on the verge of always unraveling. They have kind of this leech-like disposition that the anxiety that they think they won't make it always forces them to be on the lookout for some other new person, some other new relationship that is hopefully stronger than them and that they can then sort of leech onto. And of course, they deny all responsibility of being the person they are, being the victim they are. After all, it's another reason, not themselves, as to why they're in this place. They believe they are frail, they're powerless, they're defective, and they are constantly in need of being rescued. I know in my own reality, and I was talking with Matt recently about this, I find when I'm falling into this place of maybe I'm a victim, when I see myself in an unhealthy way, again, I'm usually not aware of it, but when I see myself as being a victim, I kind of have this narrative that goes off in my own mind that people just don't get me. Or if maybe something goes sideways here at Watershed in my job, maybe somebody doesn't like what I'm doing, or if somebody sends me an email that is appropriately critical, nonetheless still hurtful, I might say things like, instead of owning it, I might say things like, well, people just don't know how hard it really is to lead something or help lead something like this sort of evolving and ever-growing community, as opposed to maybe owning it and looking at it in a different perspective. It's very easy to fall into this place of victim. It's something most of us can easily move into. It's comfortable and it feels safe to feel powerless, because then I can't ultimately own what happens if it's not my fault, if it's somebody else's fault. And if I'm looking to you to meet my needs and you can't live up to that expectation, well, after all, maybe it's your fault that I don't make it. So maybe you say, well, that's me. I find myself being a victim sometimes. Or maybe you know somebody that you're close to and you find that relationship that you have with them is very much built on this victimhood mindset. And here's sort of the irony of it. If I'm a victim, invariably I'm looking for somebody, and we'll talk here in a moment more about what the rescuer does, but I'm looking for somebody to rescue me. But what happens with a weird turn of events is when that person sort of jumps into my life and attempts to rescue me with this intensity, and I allow them to rescue me, they begin to identify some of the imperfections that I'm already insecurely living into. In the moment they do that, I become offended. I become hurt. I become resentful. I feel as though maybe I've been mistreated, and my intrinsic defectiveness sort of surfaces And instead of sort of looking at it and saying, well, thank you for helping me and thank you for calling out my imperfections and helping me go forward, they quickly move into this persecutor mode. They move from being a victim to a persecutor. So what is a persecutor? Again, remember, this is a space that we all can kind of move into one of these three at any given time. Invariably, we come into it as a victim, but often you might come into it as a default as one of the other two. So a persecutor is somebody that is, you probably will know this person once I begin to define it if you have a persecutor in your life or you happen to be one. A persecutor is rooted in shame, that their whole disposition is sort of a shame-based mentality. When they were probably young, as a child, there was mental or physical or emotional abuse that took place in their childhood. And as a result of it, they are secretly seething beneath the surface from this sort of shame-based wrath that ends up completely running and controlling their lives. Lynn Forrest, she writes about this. I'm just going to read a paragraph about what the persecutor looks like. And again, maybe this is you. Persecutors, for survival's sake, repress deep-seated feelings of worthlessness. They hide their pain behind a facade of indignant wrath and uncathering detachment. They may choose to emulate their primary childhood abusers, preferring to identify with those who see as having power and strength rather than becoming picked on loser at the bottom of life's pile. Persecutors tend to adopt an attitude that says, the world is hard and mean, only the ruthless will survive. I'll be one of those. In other words, they become perpetrators. They protect themselves using authoritarian, controlling, and downright punishing methods. These are people that say, my whole reality is rooted in fear, and if I can't somehow manage it, I'm going to come over it and over-dominate those around me. The persecutor always lives in this mindset of being right. They always live in this way of sort of controlling and micromanaging their reality. They, after all, need somebody else to blame for the problem, so they're constantly looking to somebody else to persecute. Is this you? Is this us? Is this a relationship that you have? Right? Do you find yourself moving into that persecutor mode and quickly, as in this default, in order almost to protect your own reality, you call out somebody's imperfection? I have this little side hustle where, this little company where I have about half a dozen employees, and we make leather goods. And we've been doing this for about 11 years now, and the people I get to work with are amazing people. A few years ago, I hired this person who by default, he sat into this persecutor space. And he and I really had a little bit of a tenuous kind of relationship. But he came in, and this is what often a persecutor will do. They'll come in with a profound sense of strength, and it comes off almost really good if you're looking for leadership and influencer in the space. And he was really good at the work that he did. He was very handy, and as a leathersmith, he was very talented and very skilled. And so he came in with this sense of intensity and this sense of clarity, and I can make this, and I can do this, and I can provide this for your company. And it felt really good to have that kind of thinking and that kind of skill set come into the space. But I would find that if I would question, or I would say, great idea, but I think I want to go this way with it, instead of it being like, okay, that makes sense, I get that, quickly he would kick into this mode of, well, I'm losing power, I'm losing fear. And so he would begin to try to control the situation, and he would try to fight back as to why it should be this. And I said, no, I get it, it's a good point, but I think we really need to go here with it. And I would find myself, when I didn't align or didn't agree with his way of thinking, that instead of being something that we can kind of agree or compromise on, he couldn't. It was sort of an all or nothing disposition, because there was this fear that he was going to lose power, and that is illustrative of a persecutor. A persecutor, by definition, is coming down and swooping in and beating up on a group of people so that they themselves can look good. They need to be, in other words, maybe a little bit of the victim at some level, so that they can then kind of come around this idea that, man, it's really hard out there, it's really difficult out there, and if I'm not careful, I'm going to be oppressed, so I have to power over. And I remember a few months, maybe about a year and a half later or so, I began to do some reconstructing in the business in terms of laying out the staff, and COVID made some changes for us, and I thought, well, I need to hire a new person, and I'm looking for a person that's going to be in leadership and a supervisor over a group of different people, of which this other person that was a persecutor in my company was going to fall under. And he did not like that idea because, again, not only was he metaphorically losing power, but he was literally losing power. And to make things even worse for this gentleman, it was a woman that was going to sort of be the person of supervision and leadership in at least his work environment. Man, that did not go well. That did not go well. He pushed up against it. He saw that not only was he losing his power, but he was clearly the more skilled person. So why would somebody who wasn't as skilled as himself ever be brought into that position, which ironically was not necessarily the truth, but that's how he saw reality. And he needed the anger of that other person coming in almost fueled more and more of this sense of what it means to be a persecutor. And of course, persecutors don't take responsibility. It's not their fault. They have to come into this thing, and they have to show everybody else's imperfection so that they can show their stability and their strength. And here's what I found in all of this, though. The initial understanding when you meet somebody like this is, man, they are a cruel, mean person. But ironically, they're really not. I think it would be easy to categorize them as a bad person, but they are simply wounded individuals who see the world as dangerous. This requires that they be ever ready to strike back. They're in this constant defensive mode, which has got to be so incredibly exhausting. So the same person who worked with me, who was a persecutor, one of the Christmases that he was working with us, I had another staffer who came from this large family, and they always had these parties and these get-togethers, and they really enjoyed holidays. And for whatever reason, this one person who came from this family with all these great holidays, when it came to Christmas time that year, apparently, and I don't know how it played out, he never received a Christmas gift from anybody in his family. And so the persecutor, the guy who's been hard to get along with, he caught wind of this. And unbeknownst to anybody else, he went out and spent a bunch of money buying this other coworker a Christmas gift that didn't receive any gifts from anybody else. Because underneath all of it, I think like any of us, they're longing to somehow set free of the intensity and the exhaustion of what it means to constantly be in that place of persecuting. But only for a brief moment was he able to find himself doing that. So for some of us, we might find ourselves falling into the victim place. Probably that's where most of us are going to start. It's the dominating trait in this drama triangle. Many of us are going to move into persecutor and back and forth into victim. And then many of us, especially in the church space, we might find ourselves existing in a really strong rescuer disposition. Now, I think I personally fall a little bit more in the victim rescuer space in that category. I'm definitely really good at being a persecutor, and I need to be, but I think I fall more in the victim rescuer container. And when I kick into rescuer mode, it's not as empathic maybe as some might who are saying, your heart just goes out to somebody. Mine's real practical. If you come to me and you have a need, I quickly kick into, well, all right, I know somebody that can help you with this, or wait, maybe we can do this, and wait, no, yeah, you can use this room over there, and wait, maybe we can raise some resources for this. And I quickly find myself trying to meet somebody's need as a rescuer. And after all, a rescuer is a helper and a caretaker, so that's a good thing, right? I mean, don't we want to come around people? Isn't that the story of Christ, right? Isn't that the story of the Scriptures, that we are to sort of sacrifice so that somebody else can benefit? Yes, that's true, but a rescuer in a drama triangle, they need to rescue somebody. They need to rescue arguably the victim in order to feel vital and important about themselves. It's a different kind of rescue. It's an unhealthy kind of rescue. It's a deeply dysfunctional rescue. Let me help you, and often in doing so, I'm going to neglect my own needs because I'm too much of a, they kind of go back and forth into this, I'm a victim rescuer. I'm going to neglect my own needs because after all, I'm going to be kind of a little bit of a martyr, and that's what a rescuer will do. And if they don't get the kudos that they think people are watching or people are a part of it or people care that you gave in such a sacrificial way, they will kick into this poor me martyrdom kind of disposition. If you meet a rescuer, you'll know this because they're often derailed. They're very harried. They're overworked. They're tired. They're caught in, again, like I said, this martyr syndrome. And what ends up happening is because they're giving so hard and so much and so often, and maybe not getting the pat on the back or the attaboys, or maybe not getting in return the kind of care and love, they begin to have this sort of resentment, and it festers underneath. And again, I think in the church space, we can see this happen all the time, right? You're volunteering, you're going hard, and you're giving of yourself, and you're getting the kudos that you liked for a while, but then maybe somebody else came in and now is volunteering alongside you, and they're getting more of the attaboys, the pats on the back, and it's not quite the same. And now you have this sense of resentment, this sort of frustration. I think when I think of the story of the New Testament, Peter comes to mind in this for me. And Peter is the ultimate rescuer, right? In the Garden of Gethsemane, he comes in, and when Jesus is being taken away, he pulls the sword and chops the dude's ear off, the whole thing. Like, he's constantly in this place of, how can I fix things? How can I rescue things? And quickly Jesus resets and says, hey, here's the deal, Peter. We're good. I got it. And heals the dude's ear, right? Like this sense of a false, I got to fix this, because arguably Peter was thinking more about what was better for himself than maybe what the agenda of the evening was going to be. Maybe for some of you, you find yourself as a rescuer in this disposition. And I see a lot of this, like with the caretaker that stays home, like the single, not the single parent, but the parent that's predominantly involved in managing the home and the children, if there is that more traditional setting. And often they will give of themselves in incredible ways. They will come around and rescue their children. They will clean up their kids' rooms, and they will constantly provide all these things for their kids, and they'll drive their kids all over the place, and a neighbor has a need, and they come into that situation, and they got on Facebook, and they saw a need there, and they get into that situation, and they kind of get their ooey-gooey, sticky hands all over everybody's stuff, and they like to rescue. But invariably what happens, they rescue at the cost of their own health. Right? Well, I don't have time to really work out because, after all, other people really need me, and there's too much going on there. I don't really have time to take moments and slow down and think of my own best interest, because after all, I've got to come around all these other people who have so many needs, and I'm their rescuer, I'm their fixer. And invariably, this person has huge problems with boundaries. Rescuers are classically codependent, they're enablers. Most of the time, when we think about this is really tragic, most of the time, all a rescuer knows in this drama triangle are victims. It's all they connect with. All they come around are people who are constantly looking to have that rescuer meet their needs. All they know are leeches. That's got to be an exhausting way to live. And behind this magical belief, at least to the rescuer, is this idea that if I take care of this person, if I rescue them long enough and hard enough, then sooner or later they will take care of me. But as we already have learned, we know that this rarely happens, that the victim is never looking out for somebody else. They're only seeing themselves. And so the rescuer is hoping that the victim will in turn come back and meet their needs, but they don't. And so then the resentment begins to surface even more to the surface. So are you the persecutor? Are you a victim? Are you a rescuer? How do you find yourself in this drama triangle? And there is a distinct difference in being a rescuer and being helpful, and coming around somebody. So there is like this other narrative here to this. And so my buddy Jamie takes the napkin and brings it out and brings the pen and starts writing another and a different triangle. On that triangle, he writes the word challenger and coach and creator. And he goes on to say, well, this is the response to the drama triangle. This is the place that few people are willing to go, And the only way you can get here, he goes on to tell me, is that you are consciously pursuing it. At an unconscious, subconscious level, we live in the drama space. And for most of us, it's literally all we know. But every once in a while, we have the luxury of being in tune with that and understanding that, and then stepping out of this dreaded drama triangle. And so let me just take a couple seconds here and walk through the sort of the counter to this. So in this triangle, you have the victim who then in a healthy space becomes the creator. And this is a powerful alternative. It's the antidote, the creator is the antidote for the victim. Because the creator gains their power in saying, wait a minute, I'm going to be a solution person. I'm going to be a problem solver when it comes to whatever it is that I am being victimized. I'm no longer going to let that control me. I'm going to come up with solutions in ways in which I can sort of move out of it. I can edit that part of my reality. Maybe a metaphor I can use is my oldest son, Colson, is a mountain biker, and he is really good at it, and he's taught me a lot about it, and I'm not a good mountain biker. I can't even keep up with them, but some of the stuff he's taught me is that when you're on a trail, you have a line that you're kind of looking towards. And as I understand it, you're on that trail, and you're riding your bike, and the line is immediately what's in front of your tire, your wheel, what's right in front of you right there. You got to keep an eye on the ground and the reality in that space. And then maybe look out another 8 or 10 feet and what's there, because that's going to quickly be in your next space that you're going to be in front of. And then maybe what's just over the horizon of your handlebars, because you got to also keep on what's in your mind, what's going on there as well. And that all happens within a split second of time. And you're constantly in this mode. And then invariably, you have branches that are coming down from trees, and you have berms, and you have hills, and you have mud and stone gardens, and you have all this stuff that's sort of going on. And within seconds, you are constantly taking in what is happening so that you can then ride this really well. Now, maybe this comes off a little bit cheesy, a little bit sappy, and a little bit like Hallmarky, but what if I look at that trail from the disposition of a creator and say, okay, these berms and these bumps and these turns that I quickly have to respond to, I'm actually creating nuances and solutions as I'm going down that trail. And invariably, I'm going to fall. I'm going to bite it. My chain's going to fall off. And I'm going to get right back up onto that bike. But as a creator, I see those bumps in life actually what make the trip really good. That to a mountain biker, a flat, sort of paved, dark road is exactly what they don't want. They, by definition, want the bumps, they want the hills, they want the curves, they want all that it is that's in the way, because what's in the way is what makes the experience completely accurate and literal to a mountain biker. It's the best part of the whole thing. If I'm a victim, I see those as something that get in the way. Oh, I can't go on that trail because those bumps and those hills and those the downhill or the uphill, those are the nuances that I can't conquer. But actually, when I kick into creator mode, when I move from victim to creator, I look at those as saying, no, those are the things, they're real, they're there, they're not going away. But I wonder if I can sometimes ride around them, ride through them, ride over them, let them be there, because they're going to be, it's an honest sense of reality that pain is pain kind of a deal. But can I somehow understand that I get to create a new reality? That in that space of creating a new reality, you begin to move out of your place of victimhood. For me, I know when I'm in a victim space, what I have to do in order to be healthy, to come out of it, I will do things like engage therapy. That for me, that's been, especially of late, that's been something that's been really, really helpful for me. Sitting down with somebody who has does not have a skewed reality of who I am and can speak honestly into how I see my reality. That the power to create is a deeply powerful reality. So we move from victim to creator, from persecutor to challenger. Now, the challenger has this disposition, unlike the persecutor that says, bring it on. Like, all right, I realize that heartache and pain, they're standard fare. I can't let them go. They're not going to not be a part of my reality. But to the persecutor, they're trying to sort of overpower how they are seeing pain so that they don't have to deal with it quite so directly. To the challenger, oh, it's there, bring it on. I see it. I know it's not going to go away. And in a sense, the challenger has this gift. They might not see it as a gift, but it's a gift of clarity. That things are really, really evident and very clear in terms of how things are playing out. They have this ability to look down the path and say, yep, I see it all coming, and I know it's going to be there, and I can either try to escape it in my dark place, or in my sense of moving into a new awareness, I can kind of take it head on. I can engage it in a real honest way. And here's what challengers will do. If you're a persecutor, you're going to stay in dysfunctional relationships. You're not going to let those go. But a challenger begins to ask hard questions. Is there a different way to see this? Is there a different way to approach this? Do I need to create boundaries so that these people that were dysfunctional in my encounter, in my previous setting, now are having to sort of be pushed out and say, you know what, as long as we're going to have that ongoing dysfunctional reality of how we connect, it's over. And you define those relationships. That's a really difficult thing to do. It's a very difficult thing to do because we've gotten so used and so accommodated to that kind of disposition. A challenger, they're a teacher. They don't have a problem with like diving in and moving on. But it's something that we have to work from being a persecutor to the challenger. And then lastly, from rescuer to coach. I think this is one of my most favorite dispositions. I don't know if I always live in this very well. But instead of rescuing people, maybe you come around somebody and you guide them and you direct them and you coach them. And you ask really good questions. Because again, the rescuer wants to fix you, right? But the coach says, no, I realize I can't fix you. I realize that's the work you have to do. And in order for me to come around you, I have to ask really hard questions. I have to assert that there is possibility, that there is a new future that is out there of which you have the possibility of getting towards and moving towards and arriving into. But I'm not going to fix you because I can't fix you. And this right here might be the biggest challenge of any of us in the church space. Because we get into this work because we live with this false sense that I've got something or I've got a call on my life or God has instilled in me this longing to come around people, and that's fine, and there's maybe some truth to that, but if we're not careful, we come away from this reality of trying to rescue people, but maybe what we're invited into is coaching people. Do you have somebody in your life that is pouring into you in that sense? That's asking the hard questions. That's pushing you. Do you have somebody in your life of whom you are pouring into, who you are loving? Someone that you can speak reality into. Maybe this is where it's important to have a literal life coach, or at least a metaphoric coach in your life. Somebody that's a therapist, a good friend who can speak honestly and truly into your reality. I was talking to a friend of mine recently who has parented for quite some time and has parented longer than Taryn and I have parented. And I've got a 16 and a 13-year-old, and there are days I feel like I know what I'm doing, there are days I have no idea what I'm doing, and I think that's illustrative of any parent. And so I've just, over the years, continued to say to him, well, what do you think I should do here? What are your thoughts on this? And what's the best way for me to connect with my sons? And how can I express to them that I love them and also simultaneously set them up to sort of go out and be their own person? And he's come around me, he's kind of played that sort of coaching role. That would be a metaphor of our relationships and anything else maybe. So these two triangles ask the core base question to the whole morning is, do you want to be a victim or do you want to be a creator? Do you want to be in one that's stuck in this drama loop, or do you want to be one that re-engages newness and freshness in different people and different realities? I've been in this, I don't know what you'd even call it, I guess kind of like this coaching program for most of COVID. One of the things was when COVID kicked in, it's like, all right, there's a lot I can't control, and as a 6 in the Enneagram, I like to control things, but I can't control things, so at least I can maybe learn something. And so I jumped into this program, and one of the things they walk you through is that for many of us, we do behavior hoping, or we do feelings, then we hope for behavior change. But what they're saying here is that actually you want to have feelings change, you want to experience something different, feelings follow behavior. That for most of us, we put the emotions first into something, then we react. I don't feel like exercising. I don't feel like eating well. I don't feel like having that conversation with my spouse. I don't feel like engaging my kids that way. But actually, it's the other way around, that when you do the things you don't feel, then you begin to feel those things. And so as we look at this series, as we look at our relationships, we look at the people we love, sometimes it really doesn't feel like I really want to spend the time doing the things that I need to do. Because if I can just get stuck into that drama loop, it's a lot easier. Sometimes drama feels really good. It's a faux reality, but sometimes it feels really good. Drama gives me this false sense of that I'm doing something right, that I'm living a really good life, when in reality it's not. It's toxic, not only for me, but for the other persons I'm engaging. And that maybe this series is about feelings before feelings follow behavior, or maybe it's about death and resurrection, right? That when we die to ourselves, and some of that death is waking up to our own needs, because we've been trying to rescue people and we've been trying to fix people and realize we can't do that anymore. And so maybe that death is saying, I got to let go of my ability, or so I thought, my ability to fix people. I just can't do it. I can't control their outcomes. And maybe, or maybe I need to realize I need to give a little bit more of myself. That maybe actually what I need to do is care more for people. That I need to turn to my partner and say, what is it you need from me? How is it I can serve you in this time? How is it that we can serve each other? What does it mean for us to experience romance? What does it mean for us to have conversations that are really hard and have them with regularity? What's it mean for us to go to a professional that can help us bring out the best of who we are? What does it mean for us to bring other couples or other people around us that can speak into our reality and we get to speak into theirs? And so you're going to either live as a victim or as a creator. I argue that living as a creator is a much better and ideal space to be. So what I'd like to close this entire series with a prayer, if I may. So Father, I think of our communities right now, many of whom are struggling deeply with the whole COVID thing, in particular their relationships. Many are single and feeling this weight of loneliness has been brutal. My heart goes to them, Father. I ask that your Spirit just be this sort of salve over them, and may they kick into this mode of saying, I constantly want to work towards being healthy and moving myself out of my unhealthy place to a more ideal reality. I pray for our couples that are struggling. I know we've had several of our Watershed families and couples disband during this time. That being together so much, so often, day in, day out, was so difficult, was so toxic that the relationship could not go forward. And I ask that you just allow peace to come over those families, over those individuals, those couples, those partners. And for those that maybe found new love in this season, may that be living in a space of health and a space of beauty and tranquility and intensity and growth. And for those that have been around and being with somebody for maybe a long period of time, may you give us strength. May you give us the ability to not just fall in love, but to stand in love. I look forward to being together in this space with the people that we love. I look forward to being able to work some of these new tools that we've learned with the relationships in small groups and our blocks. And I look forward to seeing what it means for us to be a new community in the days ahead. So we love you. We thank you for our time together this morning.